welcome to the What's Up With That, a podcast hosted by me, Don Brinton. We are here to look at those things spiritual and religious with the thought, what's up with that, as we dive in for a deeper understanding. Today, we want to look at the role of music in the church as we ask, what's up with that? Our guest for today is a phenomenal musician, choir director, a praise team leader, and composer. He is none other than Shedrach Rowry, and he is, not sure if he's from Austin, but he's right here in the city of Austin, Texas. Shed, welcome to What's Up With That.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be here.
I want to ask you, why don't you just tell us just a little bit about yourself as we start off this conversation that we're going to have?
Yes, sir. So as you stated, my name is Shedrach Rowry, born and raised in Beaumont, Texas. And then I moved here at the age of 13. And so I've been here ever since. I am 48 now, so you can do the math. I don't tell people that, but you can do the math and see how long I've been here. But yeah, from an early age, I discovered I had a musical gift. Came home from elementary school after having taken a test, and the school determined that I had perfect pitch. And so they came and told my mom, my grandparents and everything, and started offering me like different scholarships to go, different places like that to explore it. And so from there, man, it was just like one thing led to another. I started like trying to play different instruments, and whatever instrument I tried to play, I could play it. And at the age of 18, I accepted my first ministry job at a church. And I've been serving in the church as a worship pastor, a minister of music, for 30 years now. I did my schooling at Austin Graduate Theology School, earned a bachelor's in biblical studies and Christian ministries. Currently enrolled in Dallas Baptist University, where I'm pursuing a master's degree in leadership and higher ed. So even though my focus has been more on theology and, leadership, the music side never left. And so I've seen God open doors for me. I'm a Billboard Charting artist, songwriter, musician. I've written a couple of books, award-winning books, traveled the world, sometimes 20,000 people in the audience that I've gotten to do my songs for and minister to. And so, just have lived an exciting life. Been married as well for 26 years to one woman, Craven Rowry, and I have 3 kids as well. And so, just lived a beautiful life, man. No complaints.
That's awesome. So married to one woman, 26 years.
26 years.
I tell you, as regards that, you've done better than I've done. And I'm going to simply say, to God be the glory, for that.
Yes, sir.
Yes. You also, here in the city, had a group called Levite.
The Levites.
Tell us a little bit about the Levites. And you are the founder and CEO of the Levite Laboratory. What's that about?
So the Levites is a group of individuals. I would say we've probably been together about 20 years. God gave me a vision that I wanted to start a collective of singers from all over the city. Not necessarily in one church or one organization, one denomination, but just span the city, looking for individual singers who typically are solo artists. And so the goal was to take solo artists and make them into a group, and not to take their freedom from them. A lot of times people lock you into a group or a band and that's all you can do. But my goal was to invite them in, but also to help them maintain their freedom to pursue other interests as well. And so even if you see the Levites today, it'll be a different collection of singers each time. Oh. Yeah, so it's like a rotating group aggregate of singers and musicians. So like I said, God gave me that idea, and it's been working for over 20 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so the Levite Lab, though, is an extension of the Levites, where we train individuals in the art of performance and musicianship, songwriting, just different artistic flavors that emerge out of the Levites band.
Okay, so you say that you train them in the art of songwriting. Now, is that general music or is that strictly Christian gospel music?
I would say general music. It has a Christian bend to it, but the principles work in every genre. And so, like things like how to formulate an introduction or a chorus or a verse or a hook. I mean, those are open to any genre. It's the same terminology. Yeah.
Awesome. You have played, and you mentioned the church, but you've also played, performed, if I can use that word. I know oftentimes in what I do and what I have done in terms of engaging ministry with young folk, and some of them who are they would say ministers, right? Or they engage in ministry. So to use that word performing can sometimes be challenging, depending on who you're talking to. So you have performed, ministered in a variety of settings, but you also have done some work with the Trinity Broadcasting Network. You've done some work with the Word Network, as well as T.D. Jakes Megafest and things. As well as, now that all of that sounds to me as if that's very much church ministry oriented, right? But you've also performed at House of Blues, South by Southwest, Austin City Limits. And not that you cannot do Christian music in those venues. So would you just talk a little bit about that?
That's a great question. I think it's tethered to what you said about performance. I think we have been given opportunities like the ones you mentioned outside of church because we know how to perform. And so I think, like you said, in church, sometimes that can be a dirty word. Like, is it ministry or are you performing? Which one are you doing? But I think it's both. I think there is an element of performance in ministry. And so what I mean by that is if the goal is to be heard and understood, there are certain things that increase the possibility of being heard and understood. And so that's what I call performance. Simple stuff like repetition can help people really get the message. And so we've taken, like I said, those aspects of ministry and have been able to transcend the church. And have honestly, I know I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but have really found probably just as much, if not more, receptivity outside of church than we do in church. Okay,
so is that singing, performing gospel Christian music, or is that performing other kinds of music?
I would say it's a mixture. We do gospel in those venues, but it's not like gospel. See, we get into it now. So it's not gospel that only makes you clap and stomp your feet. It's also gospel that makes you think, and so we mix the emotional side of the gospel music with the intellectual side of the gospel music. And I think that has caused us to be more effective. So we do gospel, but like I said, not like home, gospel per se. And we also do like middle of the road songs, kind of like Lovely Day by Bill Withers and Lean on Me, like those style. Although they're not particularly gospel songs, they are soulful songs. And so we've been able to do like a mixture of those type of songs and gospel in secular venues.
Okay, so that's maybe, as you said a little bit earlier, a way of reaching everybody for the sake of Christ.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
Sir.
Who are some of your favorite gospel Christian artists?
I would say, I'm gonna go old school first, but old for me. I'm sure if somebody could go further back than this, but I grew up on the Clark sisters, Twinkie Clark, right. Karen Clark, Jackie, Dorinda,
Showing your age now.
Yeah, I'm showing my age now. You brought the sunshine. But also the Winans family.
Okay.
Was some of my earlier influences. Andre Crouch, even though he was, I didn't see him in real time or hear about him in real time, but as I got older, I kept hearing a lot of people refer to him. So I wanted to go back and see why they were referring to Andre Crouch, James Cleveland, Thomas Darcy. Like, I want to know, like, these names keep coming up. So what did they do?
Right.
And so I went and researched and found a love for their music as well. Recently, though, of course, Kirk Franklin, he's done a lot for the progress of the gospel music. Ty Tribbett, Leandra Johnson, Kiki Sheard, and that's just the black side of it. But
that's just the black side of it. There's another side of gospel, is that right?
That's right. And I love them too. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. You said some things, and maybe we'll get to it. Today we want to more particularly talk about gospel Christian music in the church. I'd like to ask, what's the role as we look at a church, right? There are some who see gospel music as entertainment. And in a conversation, and chaplain at Houston Tulsa University, we had a chapel service, and it was referred to at some point that the entertainment in the worship experience has been enhanced. It bothered me. Seemed to say bothered me. Certainly, oftentimes, and I have been through the years when the gospel choir has been asked to perform, reluctant to allow them to go some places, because when our sisters and brothers of Ohio, when our white brothers and sisters oftentimes view gospel, they view it as entertainment. What's the purpose of music in the church, generally and specifically? And maybe you can give us, well, let's start there, and then I have.
Okay. Wow. Let me start by saying what is not, and then I'll work my way into what I believe it is. So what I've seen lately music be, as you said, entertainment, which I think that is an accurate assessment of what it is currently, which is not what it should be. I've also seen it used as a space filler for the preacher to prepare his or her message. I'm not ready yet, so keep it going, which feeds into entertainment. So I think pointing it out as entertainment, I think there's also some culpability from the leadership who uses it that way. Musicians and singers have to be comfortable deflecting praise, and a lot of times they're not. Like, let's say you do a song, it's a great song, and people enjoy it. Well, what do you do after that? Do you say thank you? Okay. But I think ultimately you should give that glory back to God, if that is the purpose of the song and the expression that's going on in church. And in that way, I think the musicians or the singers are those who are on the front line of leading everyone else into that experience. So, yeah. So it's not like a performance or, entertainment, but I'm showing you somewhere and I'm taking you to a place that I've been previously, and I recently got convicted maybe a few years ago to not only give the emphasis to a song, because I heard myself doing that one day. Like, we had this great moment in worship, and immediately after we finished, I gave glory to the song. Like, oh, that's a powerful song. That song did. And I got convicted, like, it's not about the song. Yeah. It's not about the song at all. The song is just a vehicle, a means by which we encounter God. And so I think that there needs to be some untangling of those things in modern times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that a challenge? I'm hearing all of that, but to glorify God. But when you have a song that moves you, there are lyrics and there is power in words, right? Mm-hmm. There is the vessel, the quote unquote performer, right? And I'm going to choose to use the word performer today. The performer, C.C. Winans, others, Kirk Franklin, who can come out and open themselves to be used by God in ways that others cannot. Mm-hmm. And in some sense, it seems as though there is some sense of appropriateness to give credit for those who allow themselves to be used by God, right? Mm-hmm. I'm a strong believer in I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do it. Mm-hmm. I understand I do it through Christ, but Christ is using me, mm-hmm. right? I'm the vessel. But perhaps that's also, when that happens, keeping the right mindset, ultimately. Yeah. So how do we get where we are today? And what's some of that history behind it that helps us to understand music today? I know there was a point when the effort was to, how do we get young folk in the church, right? And some churches, and probably not so much black churches, white churches mostly, and others, would have two services, right? You'd have your contemporary service and your traditional service. Your traditional service, it seemed like it was almost for old folk, and your contemporary service was for the young folk. How did we get here?
I don't know for sure. I can give you my, hypothesis and my opinion about it, but who knows for sure? I think what you mentioned is true. There was an attempt to, let me say it like this. I think there was an attempt to be inclusive, and in order to be inclusive, we lost some of the staples of our own culture. In order to invite more people into our spaces, we had to accommodate them in certain ways. And so gospel music was not seen as sophisticated music. It repeats a lot. It's simple in its arrangements, lyrical arrangements, complicated in musical arrangements, but simple in lyrical arrangement. And so in order to, reach mass appeal, I think we begin to modify some of that. And we see that as well in the pulpit. I think the preachers have changed. They don't do a lot of the hooping and hollering that they used to do. Some of them still do, but a lot of them don't.
Some can't.
Some can. And that should be
if they try, some can.
That's right. Yeah. But I think that it's the same. Whatever happened there in the pulpit happened in the choir stand, in order to be more palatable. And I think it was a mistake. I'm just being honest with you. I think we are typically the only culture who reduce ourselves in order to be inclusive, whereas other cultures maintain their full identity and you come assimilate to what they're doing. That's what I've seen.
You think that's across the board? Interesting, I guess. And maybe it's my mindset, maybe it's my understanding of music. For some reason, I still see black church music as black church music. And yes, some of it has been, I'm going to use the word contemporized. Maybe that's the change, right? Mm-hmm. But still that speaks to black people. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, you can be making me think, right?
So I agree. So I think we're probably talking from two different decades. So I think it was contemporary maybe 2 decades ago. What we're seeing now is an assimilated version of gospel music. And what I mean by that, and this is not 100% in every church, but by and large. What you're seeing is an adapted version of white worship in Black churches. And so they're not even doing 3-part harmony a lot of times. It's one unison line or, a tenor and alto part. They drop the soprano, and they're exploring themes that are not generally one that comes out of African American experience. So as you know, gospel music was more about getting through, overcoming, being liberated, and so I think you rarely hear songs like that anymore. And that could be good or bad. I mean, I'm not an advocate for doing the same thing over and over, but I think the themes within the song have changed because the church now is exposed to more themes in Christian white music. And so that's making its way into the Black church.
Would the fact that Black life, while we still struggle, and I advocate strongly with students and others, the struggle is not over yet. I think we've seen that with Floyd and all the killings that we now see, we have seen because folk have cell phones now, right? But for many, Black life is I won't say devoid of the struggle, but it's not like it was for me, right? For many. And so they don't see the struggle in the same kind of way, perhaps. Would that maybe have something to do with the change? Because the struggle is a bit different. It's when we see the number of Black lives being taken. It's when it's thrown up in our face that we are reminded of who we are, where we are, and what we have not yet overcome.
That's a good point. So I like Jesus' approach in most things. He affirms where we are, and then he calls out where we could be much further along. So I think you're right. I think the struggle is different. Sometimes it doesn't exist, quote unquote. And so we've lost that connection to those themes of gospel music. Now, here's what Jesus would probably do. He'd affirm that we've made progress, and then he'd point out how much progress we still haven't made. Yeah. And so I would say, even though the struggle is different or not seen by this generation, they fail to realize that it's still there. It's just more sophisticated now. Like the struggle is grown up. And so what I mean by that is there may not be overt beatings and dogs being sicked on us or water hoses being turned on us. But the struggle is real. When you look at mass incarceration, how many of us are still in prison? And for the same what they're being sentenced for is disproportionate with our counterparts for doing the same thing. The sentences are different. Right. And so it's more sophisticated now. And I think young people are not aware that although they, quote unquote, seem to have a better life, that it's still there. Systemic racism is still there. And so those things are still relevant, just in different ways.
Is that change acceptable based on who we are and where we are?
Say more.
Say more. Is it maybe as we see ourselves in 2024, moving forward, a need to help our young folk understand the role and the purpose so that it stops being entertainment? Because even when we are, there's struggles, right? You can talk about privilege or whatever that means to you. But in the midst of those privileges, there's struggle. in the midst of those privileges, we might quickly forget, but at some point in time, you probably will be reminded who you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a matter, and how do we maybe help folk understand, and it's in the frame of what's up with that?
Mm-hmm.
To understand that if we're going to struggle, if we're going to get through, then our music has to be more than entertainment for us.
Mm-hmm.
That was the music that got us through so much. Who can hear the preacher, right? So is there a way to create that or to help develop that understanding of what music is, what gospel music is, what sacred music, and I'm going to say sacred music and appreciate you because as we look at gospel music, church music, within our Black seminaries, there is a piece, there is a specialty, an area, a degree area where we talk about you can get a master's in sacred music, right? That we hope to understand what church and that total experience, which is inclusive of the music, right? What that means.
Yeah, that's good. I think to your original question, it's the goal is to teach the young generation, probably the older ones too, what it means to be in community. Because I think if we get community right, we'll get the music piece right. You know, when you realize that we are intricately connected and that, like Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Mm-hmm. And he speaks to a unity among people, humans, but also Black people. And I think if we come to realize just how connected we are, it would change the music experience, you know? And I know they seem unrelated, but I think they're intricately related. Mm-hmm. It would help us to stay focused on the larger themes, you know? And I don't mean, you know, to be a critic, but I know I said earlier that, you know, how Black gospel music was considered low level, you know, in terms of sophistication, you know, it was repetitive. And that was very intentional, because I think white music doesn't repeat enough. That's why you need the screens in order to be able to read the music, because there's no repetition, you know? Right. And so you can't walk away from the experience with anything that you can hold on to because it's all on the screen. It's too much. So I think there's a balance between the African American music and the white music where it should be repetitive, but also should be larger and thematic as well. And I think, just that sense of connectedness with individuals creates space for all types of music and the right perspective about it. So I know you mentioned how CeCe Winans and people like that, Kirk Franklin, are skilled in ways to increase their chances of being effective in relaying music. And I definitely agree with that. And I think that is the goal that we as audience members or those who are being led by singers should position ourselves in a way that keeps the community at large in mind. So even if I'm not moved by a particular song that CeCe Winans or whoever is singing, that doesn't mean it's not effective in a larger view of community, right? You know, and we see that a lot of times, even in some chapel services, and people feel like, well, they're not talking to me because that song didn't hit me right. Well, it's not about you. You know, I mean, I'm glad you can connect with the song. Don't get me wrong, but like, maybe you don't connect with every song at the same level, but maybe somebody else that's by you does. And so I think once we get a sense of community back, we'll understand like it's more than just about me.
Okay, so even in that, I'm sorry, but even in that worship experience, we bring the world with us. That sense of selfishness. It's about me.
Mm-hmm.
That me attitude, and I'm coming so that I can be fed today.
Exactly.
So, and if it doesn't meet my need, then I've not enjoyed the worship experience. Instead of being open enough to say that was great today, and while maybe it affirmed, it reassured for someone else, perhaps it really hit today.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about you named some African American artists, gospel Christian artists. You said there's some other ones too, right? We live in a time when gentrification. I don't want to say gentrification has happened. It's not is happening. It continues to happen, but it is not just it's happened. We're finding in our communities where persons of the community, white, and oftentimes our communities have been black and brown, or heavily black. But our communities have pushed many of the original folk of the community out, right? Have displaced some folk. Many of our members at various churches, especially if they're inner city churches, folk and the African Americans have oftentimes moved out into the burbs, right? They're driving in, but the community right around us that once was black is no longer there. Is there a call? You talked about the music and giving a little bit of ourselves. Is there a call? Is there a need to diversify our music, our worship, so that we can speak to the community, and the community being very, very different than it was perhaps years ago before gentrification?
That's complicated.
It's complicated.
That's complicated.
In all of its complicatedness, that's become a struggle that many who pastor in inner city churches are confronted with.
I think you should for the right reasons.
What do you mean?
That's the complicated part, because it's not like. So let's talk about gentrification. It is typically people moving from their community in pursuit of something that somebody else has. And they stop seeing value in their own community. They leave, and then somebody else moves in and taxes the ones who are still there out of it. And I think that's what happens musically too. When you think about artists like Bruno Mars, who we abandoned that type of music because it wasn't getting radio play, it wasn't making money, it wasn't doing this and that. Well, he came in and took our music and revived it. And so some of the black people were mad at him for appropriation, right? And so I see both sides, but at the same time, why are we so quick to abandon our customs and our culture for pursuit of something we perceive as better? You know? And so,
go ahead.
Okay? And so I'm saying, for the right reason, it has to be the right reason. So let's say, okay, we're here now. No matter how we got here, we're here. So I think there is a responsibility to speak to the community that we do have. Let's say it's different. It's gentrified now. So you have more cultures represented in this space than used to be. I think it would be unwise to not adapt to the new culture, but at the same time, don't continue to lose the markers of your own culture in order to be inclusive, if that makes sense. Let me finish. I know you jump at the bit.
Got it.
Let me finish. Let me wrap it up. I think, yeah, like what we have is special as a Black community. And we are so quick to abandon it for something that is more mainstream and is more lucrative and is more widely accepted. And again, like I said earlier, I think we're one of the only cultures who do that. Like, and this is nothing against anybody else. I'm just telling you what I see. I see African Americans running to predominantly white churches more often than I see whites coming to predominantly African American churches. And I think that's just a fact. You know, we can do the statistics on that. But I think it speaks to how quick we are to abandon what we have, what's been given to us, you know? And so I'll just wrap up by saying that, like, if the community now, no matter how it happened, if it is diverse, I think as an African American leadership team that we should preserve some of our customs, even though we're embracing everybody.
So you're not advocating give up?
No.
Would that mean that, and I guess maybe that's the complicated piece, because while you mentioned you see African Americans going to white churches, oftentimes they will come to Black churches. Don't stay home.
They don't stay?
Don't stay home.
Mm-hmm.
Is there enough reason that is right that says that we need to survive? The church needs to survive. So we not necessarily abdicate, but we maybe give more than we maybe need to if we're authentic in our worship experience.
Yeah. I think the right reason is ultimately because God desires it. Like when you look at it from a biblical perspective, that He wants all cultures and all customs to worship Him, and even more so to worship Him together. And by this, the world would know that you're my disciples by the love you show to one another.
And that's across racial lines.
It's across racial lines.
That's a statement that moves you.
That's the Good
right.
Samaritan. It supersedes racism. You know, the Good Samaritan is somebody who doesn't look like me, somebody who didn't grow up like me, but I'm still committed and have a responsibility to assist and to do life with that individual. And not just bare minimum life, but extravagant life, right? So I think that's the reason. Like, it's God's reason, but I think what has happened is no one wants to give way to the other. And part of me said they shouldn't have to. I think there should be enough space for everybody to be authentic. And even in Revelation, I think chapter 7, John said he saw a picture of worship in heaven. Mm-hmm. And he said there was every tribe, every tongue represented. So how did he know that? It's because we didn't lose our cultural distinctives. Like, people of different languages still had that language. People of different races still had their race. They still had their pigment. And so that's how he was able to hear it and see it, because even in heaven, it wasn't this homogenized view or this homogenized life. We didn't assimilate in heaven. And so my question is, why do we try so hard to assimilate here on earth when that's not the reality in heaven? In heaven, everybody maintained their culture, their language, their pigment, and they found a way to worship God together. Yeah. And I think that should be true of us today. Like, we shouldn't have to hide certain aspects of who we are. We should be able to be authentic and still be able to figure out, how do you maintain yourself? How do I maintain myself? And figure out how we worship God together.
Okay. So that's, or should I say, is that a matter of, it's a process, a matter of embracing all that I am as Black church, embracing all that I am musically, and then style of music's changed, right? Because I think even in Black church, when you started bringing the drums, when the choir started rocking, right, that was problematic in the Black church, right? So again, church evolves, music evolves, Black church music evolves, as does any genre, any culture. How do we learn to appreciate the diversity of God's music? What's up with that?
What's up with that? I don't know. I feel that it has to happen on the individual level. Like, I think even if you tried, and I've seen you try to do it, like you've tried to give a picture of diversity from up front, but I think if it hadn't took root individually, people are going to resist it. And so I think each individual has to come to a mindset that the way I do things is not the way to do it. There has to be a level of empathy developed and a way, as Jesus modeled, to be incarnational, to go among people of various ethnic groups and learn. But many of us are not willing to do that. But I think it starts there. And
so,
then
can we say not necessarily it's not the way. It's not the only way.
It's not the only way.
Because sometimes we see it as the only way.
That's right.
It's a way.
That's right.
And a wonderful way. But it's not the only way.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so I think it starts there. I think it starts with relationships. Oftentimes we expect too much out of church. And let me unpack that because I know that could be salacious. Okay. I think we expect church to do things that we should be doing. It's not going to happen from a 30-minute, 40-minute, 60-minute gathering. Like, I think some of these things have to happen outside of that experience. Maybe eat with a student of different ethnicity. Visit some of their groups and learn like some of their customs, you know? And I think that trickles into the worship experience. Once you have already established that outside of the worship experience, it only enhances what you do inside the building. Yeah.
Right. And so with that also, you said students, would that also be maybe true for others who have friends who go to churches that are Christian, but not Christian the way that you are Christian?
Oh, yeah, sure.
And what does that mean?
Yeah, and I think the goal is to, again, goes back to community. I think you have to have a table to begin discussions. We can make assumptions and write people off all day, but I think it's more effective sitting down with people and hearing their views and even if you disagree with them, at least you know the points that you disagree on, you know? And that shouldn't cause us to throw people away, you know? That should cause us to, different responses, you know? You can know how to pray for people. You know how to associate from this point on with that person. You know how to avoid certain topics with this person. You know what I'm saying? So having those conversations and learning the differences only helps us further down the road. And what I mean by that is perhaps a viewpoint is not exactly right. That is not going to change in that one conversation. But if I can set things in place where we can continue to discuss, then perhaps you and me would be better down the road having those conversations continue.
So that's saying that worship experience is important, that we need to engage in our own cultural experiences, but we also need to be open to diverse experiences, diverse forms of worship music. But that's only one part of it.
Mm-hmm.
That there is an educational component to that helps us to understand. As much as it is about an experience, there also has to be an understanding.
I agree. And I think we misunderstand understanding and agreement are not exactly the same thing. Like, I can understand why you feel a certain way and still not agree with it. But I think understanding goes a long way. You know, again, it teaches me about the landmines in our relationships. You know, if I know you feel a certain way about X, Y, Z, well, for the sake of unity, I'm going to try to avoid that if we're not ready to discuss that, you know, holistically. Just long enough to keep the relationship going. And hopefully in the future, we can broach all types of different topics. Once you know that the love is genuine, like you love me, I love you, I think that love creates space for deeper conversation. So my point is understanding and agreement are not always the same.
Okay. So I can understand if it's to refuse it.
Well, I think refusing
reject it.
Well, I wouldn't say reject it. I think we're on a spectrum, you know, where we're on a journey where God is working both of us out, you know.
Okay.
And so if I'm being true to what I said earlier, I'm not the end all be all. I'm not the one who has, you know, the final say. So I don't necessarily say reject it, but remain open for God to teach both of us what is right and what's wrong.
Okay. So this thing that we call worship and music, if it's gospel music, if it's black gospel music, if it's gospel music with the twist, that there is something of value in all of it. Right now, as I'm thinking diversity. How do we learn to appreciate it? Right now, I'm thinking Beyonce, right? Who has gone from R&B, right? And she's doing country now. Mm-hmm. And can see the value there. Mm-hmm. Perhaps it takes time. But it's something that's necessary in the world that we live in today and important. Yeah. That if God is going to be God and God for everybody, if we're going to embrace this God and talk about our brothers and sisters, we can't be brothers and sisters when we find ourselves outside of the church, because Sunday morning is still one of the most segregated hours in the country, right? And so how do we come to those places? We are authentic selves. Worship being true to our authentic selves, and at the same time appreciating and embracing the other. Mm-hmm. Is that yeah. Sounds like a challenge. I don't think we solved anything.
I didn't intend to.
I don't think we solved anything, right? But certainly, I think if we can put it on the minds of those of us who worship, in this time of gentrification, in this time of how do we survive, being true to ourselves and being faithful to the God that we believe in. Somewhere we've got to ask the question, what's up with that? I don't know if it's putting you on the spot or not. How do you feel? You Word Network, Trinity Broadcasting, diverse arenas in which you perform gospel music. And for those who might be uncomfortable with the word perform, where you minister in within diverse platforms. But how do you feel in those moments? And do you feel that you're effective and that you are truly authentic as you minister through music?
So I found that for me, and this is not everybody's experience, but the way I do it is when I'm giving opportunities to lead in diverse spaces, to give them me gradually. I think people, if you rush the relationship too fast, they'll run. And so there has to be like an on-ramp to begin to accelerate. Like even when you get on the highway, you have to gradually integrate yourself into the flow of traffic. And so that's what I do even from a worship leading perspective. I assess the room and kind of see where there may be some resistance, where there may be some support, who's people ready to go. And so I try to find my place and navigate my place in that space to give them enough to begin us moving in a direction and, to be okay with maybe we didn't get to 55 in that, in that particular time. But, the goal is to get you to 55 miles per hour. And maybe I have to come back next time and pick up at 30 and get you a little bit further on.
I was getting ready to close out, and we're going to do that in just a moment. But you said something, I just gotta ask myself about that. I assess the room.
Mm-hmm.
Most folk, I won't say most, many, will say that they're not relying on assessing the room, but they're relying on the movement of the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
If you're assessing the room, where is the place of the Holy Spirit?
Great question. I think the place of the Holy Spirit in assessing the room is to give you insight into what's happening in the room beyond what is being seen and what's being heard. Like, let's say I get to a venue early. I'm shaking hands with people, trying to meet people before I actually have to, minister to them. At the same time, the Holy Spirit is giving me insight into people's hearts and their lives. Like, it's almost unfair. It's an unfair advantage. I can also tell when people are being disingenuous. You may be shaking my hand and smiling in my face, but I can tell when there's some resistance and some racism there that I have to navigate through by direction and information from the Spirit.
Okay.
And so I don't think it's either or. I think it's both and. The Spirit gives me the ability to discern. That's a better word. Assess or discern who's in the room and what places may be resistant, and how can I navigate beyond those nuances in order to deliver a message that is effective. So
is it kind of like the Spirit of God would not have you operate in ignorance?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. My brother, my friend, it is indeed been a joy sharing with you this evening. Mm-hmm. Thank you for accepting my invitation. Thanks for being here. Pray that something has touched someone, and if nothing else, that they will continue to ask the question, what's up with that?
Yes, sir.
And we want to thank you for joining us in this segment on this evening. Pray again that something has been said that has been a benefit. And again, ours is simply to deal with those things, spiritual religious, and to get folk to think and ask the question, what's up with that? Not to shake your spirit, but to move you to a deeper relationship with God and a better understanding of why you do what you do. So we hope you will join us next time on What's Up With That, a podcast. Until then, be blessed.